Welcome to Hidden History, Stories from the Secret City. I'm Ray Smith, being the host today. Keith McDaniel is my co-host, who's not able to be with us today. Unlike myself, and I'm proud of this, I'm retired after 47 years at Y12. Keith is still working. He's teaching a high school class on video. So we're recording this at a different time than we normally would to accommodate people's schedules. And Keith just could not be with us today. But he will have this posted up on YouTube for you a little later. So I'm glad to be here with a couple of very special guests today. We have Linda Albrecht, who's with the Department of Energy, and she's the coordinator for the Manhattan Project National Historical Park activities in Oak Ridge associated with the Department of Energy. And of course, Niki Nicholas. We've had Niki on before. She's the manager of the Manhattan Project National Historical Park, Oak Ridge location. She's also the superintendent of the Big South Fork National Recreation Area and the Obed Wild and Scenic River area. So she has a broad responsibility here in the National Park of East Tennessee. Linda, let's begin by just letting you tell us a little about how you came to be in the position you're in and what that position exists of, please.
Okay. Well, I was working in Oak Ridge for many years, about 20 before I moved to Texas. When I was in Oak Ridge, I was working on the remediation side with EM, doing a lot of the demolitions and trying to save a lot of the historical things that are around. And then I moved to work for the Army as an environmental support manager, and I was responsible for the Army's pollution prevention program, compliance throughout the world, and technology development. And I happened to see this job posted. We wanted to move back up towards Tennessee, and the job just sounded like a great match. I get to be the liaison for the 4 buildings that are in the legislature, and I get to deal with all of the history and everything that Oak Ridge has to offer. It's a very unique position, and I'm very excited to be here.
Well, I'll speak for myself, but I think I share this sentiment with Niki as well. We're really glad to have you in the position and look forward to the activities that we can jointly be involved in with you. But you're right, those DOE facilities are the heart, are a big part of the heart of the park here in Oak Ridge, and they're important that we continue to work with the park on how we are able to share that information about those buildings and gain access to as many of them as we possibly can over time. Niki, would you want to give us a little status on the national park and how did we get here?
Well, first off, Ray, thanks so much for asking us to be here today. I'm really delighted to get a chance to chat. So, the park was established in November of 2015, and we opened the doors literally the next day after the ribbon cutting of the park done in Washington, D.C. So we are been working on so we're about our 8th year now, and we're doing basically a 2-front approach from across the park perspective. So just to remind folks that the park is in Hanford, Washington, Los Alamos, New Mexico, and here in Oak Ridge. We've been working on an IT backbone, a digital backbone, so that we have a robust web page information. We also have been we have an app that people can go on their phone and get all the information they need, and actually they can turn the app on when they're at any site in the park and learn about that site, various waysides and buildings and what have you. And then we also have been working on a really rigorous social media campaign, because of course we want everyone to come to Oak Ridge, absolutely everyone. But it's important to tell this story to anybody on earth that's interested in learning about the story of the Manhattan Project, especially here in Oak Ridge. And so we have a really rigorous social media campaign using YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter/X. So that's one of the things. That's from a digital perspective, we've been working that across the whole park. But here specifically in Oak Ridge, we have been working on, the 4 buildings that Linda mentioned are absolutely the heart of the park here in Oak Ridge. But the fact of the matter is, at this point in time, not too many people can go see those buildings,
Right.
correct? So we kind of really did a lot of deep thinking when we first established the park. And while we think the science is absolutely critical, the science story is critical. But so many people worked on the project and didn't really know all the science, but they feel very strongly about their role. And so we decided, let's take a look at the entire town of Oak Ridge, because the Oak Ridge story, the Manhattan Project, the secret city, was more than what went on in some of these laboratory buildings. What went on is how they live their lives. They live behind gates. Their mail was censored. They had access that was monitored, but they made an incredible life during that time under very unusual circumstances. So we view unofficially the entire town of Oak Ridge is really the park. So we've been working to that front. So we have ranger programs. We have ranger programs like Walk with the Ranger programs in Jackson Square for folks who just want to take a short walk. We have Hike with the Ranger programs out on the greenways. We have Mountain Bike with the Rangers out on the greenways, which, by the way, most people don't realize those were the evacuation routes if something didn't go very well in the buildings.
The only one that's left now is the G Road, just off of West Outer Drive, very near New York Avenue. But there were several along there now.
Yeah, indeed. The greenways do follow some of those evacuation routes, parts of them. And of course, Paddle with the Ranger and so on and so forth. So we have activities and we have a very active education program where our rangers go out into the schools when invited as well. And school groups and scouting groups come and meet with our rangers. We also know that not everybody, we want to make sure that we have an experience that it can be had by someone no matter when they show up. So we've been really working very hard to put up waysides all over town that really tell the story of what happened in that location during the project. And it's very interesting. So we have historic photos on these waysides all over town. And then people can look at what the view looks like now. And so you can get a chance to look forward, what's here now, look at that historic photo, what was there then, and it tells a story. So I think we have almost 30 of those waysides out right now in town, and we have, we'll be putting it's a wonderful partnership with the City of Oak Ridge and Explore Oak Ridge, and we are working towards putting out at least 10 new waysides every year. So it'll keep on growing, and luckily there's so many important locations in town that we want to tell that story that it's endless where we may end up putting a wayside.
It is. Linda, you don't know this, but Niki delights in putting up these markers and hinting to me that she's put up a new marker. And she'll even tell me whether it's in the east end of town or west end of town, maybe. But she loves for me to go try and find them.
And he does, he finds them.
Because I post them up on Facebook when I find them, and she wants that up there. So I'm happy with that game. I think it works well, Niki. So Linda, anything you want to add from the 4 facilities that are your responsibility?
Well, like Niki said, the 4 facilities that we have are not open to the public right now. K25 EM is just finishing up their soil work. Yeah. They are predicting that they will be done and it will be available to the public around October.
Oh, I hadn't heard that date. That's good to know.
Yeah, they felt they need 2 more quarters, but they're getting really close. They're starting on the site restoration part.
Right. And while you're talking about that site, before you leave it, I'll mention the viewing platform that's going up there. So when that work is finished, there'll be a way for the public to actually see and identify the footprint. My
Yes,
understanding now is that there's going to be flagpoles at the corners of the buildings. And I'll give
there will be something to demark the
something to mark
corners,
the code. I'll
but
give,
I don't believe they're gonna use flagpoles.
oh, you don't? They're going to use something, right? Will there be,
Yes,
let me ask this, will there be any way to tell the height of the building? You understand what I'm saying? I don't know.
yes.
You may not be aware,
And
and that's
I
okay.
think there will be some
Something.
way to tell that from what they're planning on using to mark the corners.
Okay, that's what I
They,
thought too.
we were discussing not using the flagpoles because then they'd have to have somebody to raise and lower flags and everything, and it brought up a whole bunch of other issues that we felt they could come up with a better way to mark the heights.
Well, and that's fine. Marking the heights is the important thing. I'll give you a little insight into something that I've suggested. It's not going anywhere, but I suggested it, and I would hope that eventually we'll figure out how to do it. I would love to see a laser show that gives you know, a little bit of mist flowing up in the afternoon and evening, and lasers shooting from one corner of the building to the other. I'm looking in to see how inexpensive that can be. I know there are places around the country that do that, and it surely is not a technology that would be all that expensive. But that's nothing official, and nobody's working on that except Ray's thinking about it. Okay. All right,
I
go
think
ahead.
that one falls more on Niki's side.
Yeah, okay. Well, it might. We'll see. But anyway, the
But
K-5 is,
once they're,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
oh, I was gonna say, once K-25 is done, we're also working on 9731.
Yeah.
CNS and Y12 are making some changes to the interior that right now, because of the construction contractor, have prevented public touring as a group.
Yeah.
You know, they've done some single tours because they could, the contractor wasn't working that day, but we haven't been able to
Yeah,
develop a schedule until that contractor's through.
I was very pleased that Gene Sievers was able to work an opportunity for us to take the Medal of Honor recipients into Building 9731, and they did halt the construction for that. But I understand you can't do that for general tours, but they did understand the importance of those people, and I appreciate them doing that.
But they are also working to an early FY25
Okay.
completion. So at that point, we will be able to come back around and assess how we do tours.
Okay.
Later in the summer, Niki's people, all of her rangers are gonna come down and spend some time in 9731 in the graphite reactor to do training.
Very good. And then the graphite reactor is normally included in the bus tours. It has not been for several months, and is not now because of construction activities going on around it. But it will come back.
Correct.
And I'm proud to say that they're using this opportunity to let the public have access to at least view the supercomputers. And I think that's a good variation on the tour route. But I'm looking forward to getting back to the graphite reactor too.
Yeah, and once UCOR and EM get to the point on the demolition where there's continual safe access for the public. Right now, there are times when they need that whole area, depending on what they're doing on the demolition schedule.
Understand, but we have such great artifacts as the graphite reactor, and of course in 9731 the world's only alpha calutron magnets are there. So those while we understand that there are things have to be done to make it available, they are key elements that I think are very attractive for tourism coming into Oak Ridge. So we look forward to getting those to where they're more readily accessible. All right.
We do too.
All right. Let's talk about near-term plans. And Nikki, let's start with you. What have you got happening that that we can let our folks know about coming up real soon?
Well, thank you, Ray, for asking. Of course, we have the summer started, and we've just hired another National Park Ranger here at Oak Ridge. So that really helps us tremendously so that we can continue our education programs with the schools and the camps and things. But we are going to be really accelerating the number of ranger programs out in the community. And our next week is our first program that we're going to be offering at the K-25 Overlook, which is for folks who may not be aware. There's a little building with interpretive materials up across from the K-25 site. And so we'll have a ranger out there. And we are going to be of course, we're continuing our tennis court dances that we've done for several years. I think we stopped them during COVID for a little bit, but this is where we, every third Thursday of the month, we invite the public to come to Jackson Square tennis courts and kind of recreate what people used to do during the war. The powers that be that were managing the project here in Oak Ridge knew that they had a lot of young people, and you want to keep them busy, because if they're not busy, gosh knows what they might be doing or saying. And so they used to turn the tennis court in the summertime into dance halls, basically, and play music, and people come and dance, and sometimes they might meet that special person. Well, now we have tennis court dances from 7 to 8 every third Thursday of the month. Started back in May and will go through October, and we invite everyone to come out. Some people come out and dance, some people come out and sit on the lawn and listen, but it's a really fun time. So that's something we're doing. And we're doing, of course, going back to Paddling with the Ranger program, where we'll paddle along the Clinch River. We'll be doing a Paddle with the Ranger program in two Saturdays from now. And of course, we're going to be actually out at the farmers market in the month of part of the month of July, talking about the Manhattan Project as well, because that's a different crowd that we might not see in some places. We want to make sure that we are there for the visitors that come to Oak Ridge, but also for the community members that are in Oak Ridge. So lots of ranger programs. You'll be seeing a lot more ranger programs with increased staffing. A lot more waysides are going to get built. And we look forward to really being able to do a better job reaching out to the school systems.
I don't know, and Nikki, I'm springing this on you. I apologize for
It's
that.
okay.
We've got the Lavender Festival coming up the 15th of June. There'll be a lot of people at Jackson Square then. Something you might think about.
I will indeed. I think the other thing that I want to mention is that we've been trying to reach out to surrounding parks and cultural centers that have linked to this story. So if you think about what went on in East Tennessee during mid-century, you had TVA coming into East Tennessee, and it's East Tennessee, the headquarters of the TVA. And they built their first dam in Norris, Tennessee, and that's not that far away from here. So you had this big federal program come in, and a lot of local people working on the program. And then you had, of course, a decade later, you had the Manhattan Project coming in to the area of Oak Ridge with a big federal program with a lot of local people working on it. And then, of course, what we've been trying to explore recently is how those two big federal programs may have changed basically the evolution of local civil rights movement in this area.
Yeah.
So we've been looking at a lot, working with the Green McAdoo Cultural Center, which is located in Clinton. And so the Norris Dam State Park actually, and also the Tennessee State Park System, their headquarters, as well as the Green McAdoo Cultural Center, and here Manhattan Project here in Oak Ridge, those four entities have been working together, and we're developing ebooks for young learners to talk about the changes that went on in the society during this mid-century, and how actually this whole movement from the development of the TVA and all the changes that happened, electrification, to the Manhattan Project and all the changes, and how things continue to change into the 1950s and 60s. So that's another thing we're working on right now.
Well, that's outstanding. I did not know about that, and I'm glad to hear it. I think it's a way to reach our youngsters, our students, that I think is important. You may realize that I've been on the Committee for Social Studies Standards in the state of Tennessee,
Mhm.
and I realized by looking at what we're actually teaching in social studies that there's just not much history being taught.
Yeah.
So we need to help our schools in any way that we can to get those kind of details included in their curriculum. So, and they're always looking for excellent materials that they don't have to develop, that they can use. So I think they'll make good use of anything that the park can provide. So
We also have actually a few lesson plans we have on our website that's free to anyone that meet the Tennessee State School standards right now for
good.
young learners. So everything we're trying to do, we want to make sure it's available and free, that people can access wherever they are in the state.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad to hear that. I'm also proud to hear that you've already hired that ranger.
Yeah.
I need to meet the person. I don't know who they are. So
Well, yes, you need to come by and meet Matt Klein. He's working at the front desk at least half of the days that we're open, and so he actually has worked for us before. Before he was actually what we call a visual information specialist, where he was working on a lot of our web material.
I
But
see.
he really wanted to come out from behind the web and get a job that's actually more front end with the public. So he applied for the job, and we're delighted that he's here.
Oh, well, I am too. I think that's great. The fact that we now have a ranger again, and you've had one here before, so it's not new, but it's just that.
We have two now, so yeah.
Oh, it absolutely, and that's great. And Linda, we're just delighted to have you in the position that you're in, because I know it helps Nikki, but it'll help the Department of Energy as well. So I think it's a good combination to have that. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with our audience that I've not asked you questions about that you might want to say? Linda, anything from you?
Well, I think one thing I was just gonna add, like when the Rangers have done the hiking program, they've been working with us to get the gatehouses open so that they can tour the gatehouse at the start of the tour and stuff before they hike. So there's a lot of those smaller facilities that aren't named in the legislation that until we can get access in, we're trying to make available.
And I appreciate that. That gatehouse on the turnpike, and people don't realize this in many cases, and I usually point it out to them. The gatehouses were built in 1948, 49, when the city was actually open to the public in March the 19th of 1949. At that point, these three gatehouses were used to isolate the three government facilities. And the one over on Bethel Valley is missed by most people. I mean, only if you're going to the lab, you'll see it, but otherwise the general public doesn't come close to it. Well, they're close to it, but they can't see it. And so we've not done anything there, but in the, except the main.
Well, and that one DOE doesn't still own.
No, that's correct. That one is, I think if you look close, you still own the little building on the south side of the road. But
That's what I was told.
yeah, you don't own the main building. Lockheed Martin owns that, or they did it the last time I checked. And the reason I know that is several years ago, I asked them to paint it just to keep it, from being overgrown with vines and deteriorating so much. And they painted it. But I'm glad to say the other, excuse me, the other two, the one on Scarborough Road and the one on the turnpike, have actually been maintained over the years. They have period furniture in them, Ed Westcott photographs, and we were using them for small meetings. And now the main use of the one on the west end is when the ranger gives a talk there about security and secrecy, and introduces people to the park, but also to the history by using those gatehouses. So I think that's a good addition. And as Niki said, the whole of Oak Ridge is the park. I realize the legislation defined very specific facilities, they even defined the Alexandrian. And I'm proud to say that they just yesterday, I took a group of people into the lobby and showed them the Ed Westcott photograph of Robert Oppenheimer setting up on the mantle. And then there's a historical display that they have over on the wall. And they also have photographs of the sad condition that that building got in before the Department of Energy took $500,000, purchased the facility, stabilized it, then gave it to a nonprofit organization who in turn gave it to Rick Dover for $1. And then Rick spent $8 million on it, refurbishing it and bringing it back. He even went to Chicago to the Skidmore, Owens and Merrill offices and got the original drawings for that guest house.
Wow.
And in the main lobby, the floor is still the original floor. That's all he could retain because
That's neat.
it had all been so deteriorated. But he did everything he could to bring it back to look as close to the original as he could. And of course, he kept that fireplace. So I framed that picture of Oppenheimer and put it up on the fireplace. And most people, Niki, you talk about tourism. That Oppenheimer movie brought a lot of tourism into Oak Ridge, even though Oak Ridge is only mentioned a couple of times in the movie. But I've done 17 bus tours since the Oppenheimer movie came out last year, just in the rest of the year. Hadn't done as many this year. But
Well, I'll tell you, Ray, our visitation at the park here
yeah,
has doubled in the past year.
wow, how about that?
Mhm.
And I mean, there are other things that have happened too, but you got to recognize that movie had a significant.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Surely did. I just wish now somebody would do one on Colonel Nichols. He actually ran the Manhattan Project from here in Oak Ridge,
Mhm.
but he doesn't get the recognition, and I understand why. But I do think there's a good story there. And by the way, his niece is writing a series for me to publish on Historically Speaking,
Oh,
focused
excellent.
on Colonel Nichols. So I'm anxious to get that out. It'll be out in a couple of months, but she feels the same way. I mean, she went to the Oppenheimer movie, but she didn't like the way Colonel Nichols was treated in it. I understand. I mean, the conversation between Nichols and Oppenheimer happened. He told him to be careful when he gave him a security clearance, to be careful who he associated with. But that conversation took place in Chicago. Now, I understand Christopher Nolan, he's got this set in Los Alamos, and he's got this one sentence scene that he needs to create. Well, does he want to build him a Chicago set? No, let's just let it happen in Los Alamos. And I understand that kind of creative license, but Nichols actually only went to Los Alamos twice. He went there in March of 43 and April of 45, and he never had an office there. But at any rate, the movie did bring tourism into Oak Ridge.
It did indeed, yes.
Any final thoughts about what you would want the public to know about our national park here?
So first off, I want to say that nobody is happier than I that Linda is on board. I'm just so delighted that Linda, that you're here. I'm so happy. Since Linda's gotten here, we've already been able to move so many little things along that have just been stuck for months and months and months. So Linda, I'm glad so glad you're here. Back to what you asked, Ray, what I want folks to know is that we are really, now that we have more staffing, that Linda's here and all, we are really excited about where we're going to go next. We are committed to tell everyone's story here at the Manhattan Project in Oak Ridge. And so we are really diving into a lot of voices that really hadn't been heard as much. We're really trying to do a lot more work on the role of women in the here at Oak Ridge, role of African Americans here in Oak Ridge, and probably other groups of people that we just haven't really done a very good job of exploring completely yet. So I just can't wait to see what we're going to work on next.
Let me give you a hint of some to look into.
Okay.
There were 3,000 families that were displaced because of the Manhattan Project here in Oak Ridge. Some of those families still have descendants that are either here close or are still aware. For example, the Friels Bend cabin, there's a whole family of Friels that are still in the area and occasionally come back to Oak Ridge. A connection to some of the people who had to leave
Mhm.
might be a good idea.
Excellent.
Again, that's just
I
another
appreciate that. Yeah.
that could be overlooked if you didn't think about our history here. So another group you can look into. All right. Well, if there's nothing else, I appreciate the time that you all have allowed me to bring you on and talk about our national park. And I would say that we noticed just the Oppenheimer movie increased our tourism significantly. And the fact that we're a national park has increased our tourism. And I look to the future and we see things happening like the small modular reactors that are going out on the west end of Oak Ridge, both TVA and also the others that are being built out there, Kairos Power Building, the first one I think that will be online. But that, and when we get that viewing tower completed and the footprint completed, that's going to make that west portion of the park more attractive, and we'll bring in additional people. I mean, come on, it's only 5 miles from the interstate, and
Mhm.
just think about it. If we put a sign up on the interstate, well, we would get some folks coming off, and well, we got to be ready for them because they're going to get here. You realize, and Nikki, you know this and know it well, but we're very close to the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, most visited park in the nation, 14 million.
Mhm.
And we also, and you can give us some numbers, Nikki. I'd hate to put you on the spot, but I don't know how many folks come up to the Obed and to the Big South Fork, but
More than 1 million people do.
how about that? So
Yeah.
we've got opportunities all around us here that if we could just attract, 1 or 2% of those people going to those parks, it would overwhelm Oak Ridge. And that's what we're trying to do, Nikki, is to make it to where the Oak Ridgers realize, oh my goodness, what are all these folks coming in here? Let's put them up in hotels. Let's feed them. Let's take advantage of them. But we'll get there. And I think we've made good progress with the park over the time that we've had it in place. And I look forward to what you're doing together in the future, the two of you. So thank you again for allowing.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ray.
Folks, I want to tell you that our next program, we're going to have the great grandson of John Hendricks, the prophet of Oak Ridge. And he's going to talk about his new book, the name of it is The Prophet of Oak Ridge Revealed. And I'll tell you up front that Dennis Aislinger is a research nut. He just loves to dig in and find out details. And he's learned more about John Hendricks than I ever thought could be brought out about him. So we're going to have him on for our next program. Thank you for being with us, and we look forward to seeing